Hi, my name is Jason Garfoot. I'm a Senior Applications Engineer here at 3M. Today I'm going to talk to you about matching OEM textures using RockGuard and our performance spray gun. Texture coating has got increasingly more technical over the last few years. As you can see on the panel we have here, texture can be anything from very, very fine to very, very coarse. Today, using this one simple tool and making fine adjustments, we're going to show you how to match those textures and make your life a little bit easier in the spray booth. Before we get started, we just want to cover a couple things. The first thing is we always want to ensure we're wearing our proper PPE. In this video, you'll see I'll be wearing a PAPR system, nitrile gloves, a full paint suit, as well as safety glasses. The second thing we want to cover is this video is intended for professional use, so by technicians that are actually out in body shops. For any of the safety information or warranty information, we will put a link in the description below. So for today's video, we're going to replicate some of these OEM textures on the panels behind me. I'm going to show you how to do a fine, a medium, and a coarse texture by making different adjustments to our spray gun. In the shop, you're going to want to make sure your panels are properly prepped. The panels behind me today are prepped using a red coarser Scotch-Brite type pad. We always recommend referring to whatever paint line that you're using in your shop, the technical data sheets for that product, to make sure you're scuffing your panels accordingly. There's going to be a range with any of the 3M products. All of that information can be found with the technical data sheet for the RockGuard that you're using. Typically, it's a range anywhere from 320 to 500 as far as the grit goes for prepping your panel. And then if you check your paint company's technical data sheet, that's where you can fine tune that. Again, that could be anywhere from 320 to 500, but they will have a direct call out for the product you're going to be applying over the RockGuard. So our panels are all set up. The next thing we're going to do is get our product in the cup. We'll get it put into our spray gun, and then we'll achieve these different textures. This is something I always recommend a technician does, is build your own panel showing how you set up your specific spray gun for your product to achieve those textures. And that can save you a lot of time by being able to dial in to an exact coarse or medium texture, and then you can fine tune later instead of having to start from scratch every time. So what we're going to start with today is we have our chip guard in our paint cup. If you're using a paint cup system that has a screen, be sure with chip guard or any thicker coating that you always pop the screen out. That'll have a big impact on the flow of these higher viscosity products. For this one too, we're also going to pop off our collar, put that into our cup, make sure everything is attached. And then once we line up the top to our pressure cup, we can go ahead and screw that down. Now, one of the huge benefits of using our performance spray gun is there's an HO attachment for the gun that allows us to actually pressurize the cup, so we can use standard HVLP tips with a conventional gun and get these higher viscous products to actually spray through. Where typically you would need to use a separate chutes gun or a no-mess cleanup gun, another 3M product, but you don't have as much control over the texture itself. By using an HO setup with our PSG gun, you have full control over the range of textures that you want to build. Now that we have our product in the cup, the next thing we're going to do is actually attach our nozzle to the gun itself. We're going to be starting today by building up a coarse texture. In order to do that, we're going to start with a 2.0 HVLP nozzle, and that's going to go into our performance spray gun. If you're trying to achieve a coarser texture, we usually recommend starting with a 2.0 nozzle. You can go finer if you want to. It all depends on how you spray. Again, all of our base recommendations can be found online with our PSG recommendations. So now that we have our tip selected and put on our performance spray gun, all we have to do is mount the cup to the gun. As you can see with our HO setup, this is the pressure hose that pressurizes this larger plastic cup. There's a little spot on the side of this gun to slide that hose on. So in setting this up, all we do is line up our tabs, turn it until it hits a stop, a quarter turn, At that point, we can flip our gun over, it's nice and secure. And then our hose hooks up to our HO attachment on the back of the gun. Now we're ready to start spraying. So before we actually spray our panel that we're going to be doing our texture matching on, first we want to test our spray gun and get set up for our coarse texture. So now we're going to do our test panel to make sure we achieve the texture that we want. Again, this is where it's very handy for technicians out there to build their own spray out panel, almost like you would with a color deck, with your different texture coatings and the settings you use to achieve those to save time. So I can see on here, using my performance spray gun, in order to achieve my coarser, heavier texture, I'm going to want my air pressure very low, around 3 to 5 psi. We also have 2 different control knobs on the back of the performance spray gun. One is for our fan size, the other is for the amount of fluid that's actually coming out. To build a coarser texture, I can see I typically want to start with my fluid knob about 2 turns out, and then my fan pattern I'll keep a little bit smaller, so about 1 turn out. The other thing I want to do is make sure that my HO knob is open. It takes about 1 full turn to open that to make sure that my cup is pressurized. Now that our settings are at our starting points, we're going to go ahead and do some spraying, and I'll make fine adjustments as I'm spraying before we go ahead and apply that texture to our actual panel. So again, this is where it's really important to build these spray out panels with your different texture settings. It really speeds up the process of dialing it in. So as you can see, I was spraying there. I started with my base settings that I always use for coarse texture. All I had to do was make a very small adjustment to my fluid knob, and my texture looks right where I want it. For today's demo, we're going to be spraying 4 different sections of this panel and showing you different textures from coarse to very fine. You may see very coarse on things like Toyotas, especially the pickup trucks. And then on the fine side, you might see that on something like a Tesla, where it's very, very fine and barely noticeable. So we'll show you how to build each of those textures in this demo today. So now that we're all dialed in, we can go ahead and spray our coarse texture. So as you can see, I just used smooth overlapping pattern until I got the coverage and the texture that I wanted. If the coarse texture is very, very, very coarse and you see that you're leaving gaps in between, if you want, you can use a finer texture and do a coverage coat first. You'll typically let that flash 5 to 10 minutes, and then you can go in with your really coarse texture and spray after to make sure you have full coverage. So now that we've achieved the texture we want with our coarse texture, we're now going to jump into the medium texture. Now again, I'm going to refer back to my spray out sheet to see what I need to change to get the texture that I want. So to go to a medium texture, the first thing I want to do is increase my air pressure. The reason I want to do that, it's going to help break that up a little bit more and atomize it finer to get that medium texture that I'm trying to achieve. The other thing is I'm going to need far less material than I did with the coarse texture. So I'm going to turn in my fluid knob about a turn. The other knobs can stay the same. I like my pattern size, so the fan knob can stay where it's at. And really with any coating, we're not going to make adjustments to the HO knob. It's basically either on or off. So we're going to leave that a full turn open to make sure that this stays pressurized and keeps everything flowing out of the tip smoothly. So now I'm ready to do a test spray for my medium texture. Just like before, I'm going to make fine adjustments until I get the texture that I'm trying to achieve, and then I'm going to go ahead and spray that on my actual panel. So our medium texture is sprayed exactly the way we want it, and you can see a noticeable difference from the coarse to the medium. The next thing we're going to do is we'll pull our paper off and we'll continue to go to an even finer and finer texture. So next we're going to go to our finer texture. So again, I'm going to refer to my spray out sheet. So I see that I need to turn my pressure up even higher, which obviously makes sense because we need to atomize this material even finer yet. So I'm going to go ahead and jump that up to about 20 psi. The other thing I want to do is crank in my fluid a little bit more. So we started at 2 turns. For the medium texture, we went into about 1. So I'm going to go in about another quarter turn or so and see how that starts out. Again, I'll make small adjustments as I'm doing my test piece before I actually apply this to my panel. Again, thanks to my spray out card, we made quick work of dialing in our fine texture. Now I can unmask my bottom and I'll spray my fine texture on the left. So as you can see again, the texture is much finer than the top 2. We have a nice gradient going on. The last step will be to go to ultra fine texture, similar to what you would see on a Tesla or some of the newer cars out there. So there's a lot of different ways to get a finer texture like you would see on some of these newer vehicles. One way to do that is to keep increasing air pressure. You can also decrease the amount of fluid that you're running through the tip. Or another thing that you can do is to increase the fan pattern. So now we're taking that same amount of fluid and we're spreading it over a wider area, which is going to make that texture less noticeable. Typically with an HVLP tip, we're going to want to stay around 20 psi. If you can't get the texture as fine as you like there, all you have to do is step down to a finer tip size, maybe a 1.8 or a 1.6. For this one, we're going to stick with the 2.0 and just see how fine we can get it. So after a few micro adjustments, I really like how my texture's looking, so we can go ahead and spray this to the final section of our panel. So now you can see by just using this one specific tool, we can make a lot of little micro adjustments to get any texture we would need to match the OEM texture that's on the vehicle we're repairing. There's plenty of adjustments you can do outside of this. I would always recommend build your own texture card to shorten that process when you have to go in and repair a vehicle. Thanks again for watching the video today. This is the first of a series we're going to be doing with rock and chip guard texture coatings. We're going to be doing some transition techniques, showing different ways to mask that off to achieve the transition lines that you're looking for. And we're also going to be matching specific OEM textures. So hop on and check those out. If you enjoyed this content and found it useful, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and check out more content on Collision Repair Academy. Thanks for checking out the video, and we'll see you in the next one.